Welcome everybody, Joe with ECRM here, and I have with me today Mel Bandler from Fair Trade USA, and she was one of the moderators of our roundtables during our Store Brands virtual session. So Mel, thank you so much for joining us and for moderating the roundtable. And to start off, can you give an overview of your topic?
Yeah, I would love to. So my topic was pretty exciting. It was around sustainability and recycling, or thinking about sustainable packaging. So I took the opportunity to talk a little bit about what that looks like today in terms of COVID shopping habits and where consumers are thinking about as they think more and question where their products are being made or how they're being made or who's making them. And then really looked at a deep dive around retailer commitments and different kinds of things that are popping up in the market around reusable packaging. And I felt that that really resonated with the group.
Okay, so since you mentioned it, how is COVID impacting sustainability?
So what we talked about as a group, and what I kind of brought some stats around, is that we're seeing that consumers are really interested in sustainability. Like I said, they're kind of really doing more research and trying to understand that path to purchase. And around that peak, right in March, April, when people were, hoarding and thinking about lots of purchases, there was a huge uptick in sustainable products. The market index and market share was higher. And that's pretty much plateaued. So it hasn't continued to rise, but it also hasn't gone down. So there still is an interest in sustainable products and better for you products as well. But we are seeing that, and this is what one of our retail participants shared, is that the interest in plastic bags or in thinking about different ways to have less contact at the stores has gone back up, whereas in the past, consumers might have brought their reusable bags and thought about how to be as eco-friendly all throughout their whole shopping experience.
Yep. In fact, over here in New York, in March and April, they lifted the ban on plastic bags. And but then once they got back to the paper bags, I mean, some of the retailers around here, they have really, really crappy paper bags. And, I'm thinking, it's going to limit the amount people are buying per trip, because with plastic bags, I load them up. And with the paper bags, I can barely, they break on the way. So I'm going to get less so I guess you got to achieve that balance. But nobody wanted to do the reusable bags. So during the roundtable, so you had a mix of buyers and suppliers, mostly suppliers in yours. So what were some of the things that were on their minds?
I think a lot of our suppliers, it was interesting. I had a diverse group, so from North America, the US and Canada, but also a lot of European participants. And so I think the European participants definitely wanted to ask our North American participants around what packaging requirements were happening and where the interest was, because they have this conception that, Europe is leading, but it's hard to tell from the outside. So we really talked about what the retailers are asking for and how the suppliers are trying to respond to those asks. So whether that be to be recyclable or reusable, and some of the commitments that we see, like a Walmart or a Kroger or an Aldi saying that by 2025 all the packaging has to be reusable or recyclable or compostable, and so what that actually means on the supply chain, because in some situations those packagings don't actually even exist yet, but they're being asked for. So it's like, how can they plan ahead to respond to those needs? And there's a lot of costs involved. So we talked a little bit about who gets to pay those costs and where the costs are going to get passed on. And I think the resounding, agreement amongst the group was that the consumer really needs to be educated, because it's amazing that the retailers are pushing for these initiatives, but there still needs to be an understanding by consumers of what it means either to be sustainable, how the product is made, or also that packaging. What does it mean? How do you recycle it? And I know that there's the How to Recycle label, which is getting a lot of press now, because a lot of consumers are confused as to how to recycle different composite products. And so helping them to say, okay, take the cap off, put that in there. This is number 2 recycling, or whatever it is. It goes a long way.
It's also a lot of work, and sometimes people are lazy. I mean,
yep.
to separate all of that, and maybe, like the apartment building, if you're in an apartment building, they don't have all of the bins for the right one. So I think you're right. A lot of education is going to help. Were there any particular challenges faced by these guys?
Yeah, I think that there was definitely a conversation around the trade-offs, because one of my participants was really, I thought it was interesting, was sharing about how some, whether you're switching from glass to plastic, there's, it's better to have glass in some consumers' eyes or some retailers' eyes, but then when you have glass, it's harder to ship. It also, there's more electricity that it takes to produce it. Or one of our participants was a beverage supplier, and so they were talking about, there's a shortage of certain kinds of metals to create cans or different kinds of things like that. And so those further down the supply chain, manufacturing and more packaging situations are a little bit invisible, kind of how we think about also, the people that are producing them. And so those are hurdles to overcome, and also like in some situations, as I shared, those things don't exist now. So how do we move the market to respond to the demand, but also like it doesn't currently exist, so how can we make it happen?
You know what I've noticed just by me, there's an organic market that I shop at, and I do notice that a lot of the products in there are leaning more towards glass packaging versus you go to a mass retailer, there's a lot of plastic packaging. And I think it's just also what you mentioned, the consumers going to that store may be more educated around it. They accept maybe a higher price because they know what's involved, and that's their way of contributing. Cool. So, well, thank you again for moderating the roundtable. And for anybody who would like more information about Fair Trade USA, what's the website?
It is fairtradecertified.org.
All right. Great. Thanks. And I hope to see you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe.